Hey guys, it's time to talk. Here we go. Welcome, guys, to another podcast of Let's Talk with Carl E. Long. This is your boy Carl E. Long coming to you live. Live, yes, this is recorded. You listening to, but I'm live right now, recording. So on a Friday night late, I'm up. Let's just do it. Let's get this out of the way. All right. So today's podcast, guys, this has been, I tell you, I don't know what I've gotten myself into. After the 2024 election, I said I was going to do this podcast, but there's so many untruths out there that I want to dedicate time to giving people the truth, going out there and really talking about things that we cared about. And the last four podcasts have been kind of crazy with my comments. I mean, I have been covering some things. Let me show you what I've been covering the last four podcast series. I have been covering, let me put my glasses on so I can see here. So, my last six, I should say, the story the media won't cover. I talked about the 2024 election problems that we know about. And then I talked about how a lot of my white brothers and sisters telling us to get over it. Get over it. Get over all of the stuff that you think that we're doing to y'all because y'all are just going through craziness. It's a figment of your imagination. And then I said, we're tired of explaining the pain. We're tired of explaining about racism in this country. We're tired of it. And then I went to why does black progress always feel under attack? Yes, it does. Tulsa, it always feels under attack. Every time I think we made a headway, we get slapped down. Why? And then we talked about Dear Clarence Thomas and the voting rights decision. That one right there was hard to do. And then there was the afraid to ask, why people are afraid to ask questions without getting put in a bubble as to like, you're racist, you're divider, or something. But we should be able to ask questions when we are uncomfortable. Yeah. So those are the things that I have been talking about. And as a podcaster, what we do, a lot of people don't listen to your entire podcast. They just don't. It's just what they do is we break podcasts down into little clips. And I've had a lot of little clips. I post a lot of them. That's what all podcasters do. That's how we get your engagement and what have you. And boy, they have been blowing me up. MAGA has found me, guys. But also a lot of people that have liked my comments too. And again, the likes outweigh what MAGA is doing. But guys, this is a hard nut to cut. This is a hard nut to crack. I'm telling you. I mean, this is terrible. It is terrible. So what I want to do today is we're going to go through some of those comments. So this is what today's episode 65 is. Analyzing viewer comments. Let's break it down. Let's just break them down, guys. And I'm going to give them as much truth as that I can give. But I'm telling you, the mindset of the MAGA person it's unbreakable. It's unbreakable because you have to think about where they're getting their news, where they're getting this information. And and a lot of it is educational related. A lot of them don't have a lot of common sense or book sense, and they're just being led. And that's a sad thing too. That's a sad thing to know too, but it's out there. So before I do that, before we break it down, I want to play a video that has got them extremely mad because I covered this video on my podcast. I shared it, not on my podcast, on my Facebook reel. It's a Facebook reel on my page. I have a podcast page on Facebook. And they were not happy about Dr. Robin DiAngelo. Dr. Robin DiAngelo. Let me tell you who she is, just so you know what's going on. So, first I want to thank everybody who watched my last several podcast episodes, whether you agreed with me or not, whether you disagreed, whether you left a positive comment or one that challenged me. Thank you. I thank you so much. That means you were engaged. That's all I want. And engagement is exactly why I started this podcast. I told you over the last 4 episodes, I received hundreds of comments, hundreds. Some of them, they're still going. I'm looking at my phone right now. They are still going. I can pull up one right now and just show you that I've gotten a comment. I've gotten a comment. Yes, I've just gotten a comment. They are still mad. They are still mad. And to be completely disagreeing with my perspective. So over the last 4 episodes, I got all these comments. Some were encouraging. Yeah, very few comments were encouraging. I got more likes. Some were thoughtful. Some asked questions. Some completely disagreed with my perspective. And some, honestly, were difficult to read. They were. But today isn't about embarrassing anybody. I'm not trying to do that. I'm not reading these comments to attack people who wrote them. In fact, if you left one of these comments, thank you, because your words opened the door for a conversation I think America desperately needs. Today is not about proving anybody wrong. It's about asking, what are we really saying to each other? So let's break it down. But let me first I want you to first watch a video I shared with the viewers, and it caused quite a storm. Some folks were so angry. I'm telling you. I can imagine what kind of comments she gets, but let me set up the video up and tell you about the person's video. This is Dr. Robin DiAngelo. She is an American academic educator, consultant, and author and best known for her work on race, whiteness, and systematic racism. She earned a PhD in multicultural education from the University of Washington and has spent decades studying how race operates in institutions, particularly in the United States. She became widely known after publishing the book White Fragility, which I've read cover to cover, which became a bestseller in 2018 to 2020. Her central ideas, Dr. DiAngelo argues that racism is not limited to individual acts or prejudice or hatred. It is also embedded into social systems, institutions, historical practices, and many white Americans have been socialized to think of racism only as an overt bigotry, making conversation about systematic racism difficult for them. White fragility describes the defensiveness some white people experience when their racial assumptions or privileges are challenged. This defensiveness can include anger, denial, guilt, silence, or changing the subject, because race shapes American society. Everyone has biases they should continually examine. And one of our frequently discussed ideas is that the question should not be, am I racist, but whether, how have I been influenced by society with racial inequality, and what can I do about it? Why her work has become influential is because it's been used by universities, Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, nonprofit, diversity, equity, exclusion training programs. Her writings gave many organizations language to discuss systematic racism following events such as the killing of George Floyd and the nationwide protests in 2020. So let's listen to this video. I always like to start off with a video of an ally or someone that is for the cause, that is trying to help change this narrative. So let's listen to this video and then we'll come back on the other side. Here we go.
Good 20 plus years of talking day in and day out to white people about racism, I feel very confident to say that there is something profoundly anti-black in this culture. And that nothing seems to turn white people's cranks of resentment, like thinking black people got something over on us that they didn't deserve. And the deeper belief is that they're inherently undeserving. I believe in the white mind, black people are the ultimate racial other. Well, historically, we projected our sins onto the black body. Right? Lazy, shiftless, criminal. We projected our sins onto the black body. Right? Today, in addition to doing that, we obscure the system of racism that we uphold and we exempt ourselves from its forces. Right? And we do this in a way that appears to be progressive. right? That race doesn't matter to us. Number 3 looks at racism after the civil rights movement. And after the civil rights movement, it made a brilliant adaptation. So post-civil rights, racism got reduced to the following formula. A racist is an individual who consciously does not like people based on race and is intentionally mean to them. Always an individual, must be conscious, must be intentional. And that definition exempts virtually all white people from the system of racism. This definition, I believe, is the root of virtually all white defensiveness on racism. It makes it virtually impossible to talk to the average white person about the inevitable absorption of a racist worldview that we get from being socialized in a racist culture in which white supremacy is the bedrock. Because you suggest that anything I have done is racially problematic in any way, and I'm going to hear a question to my moral character. And I'm going to need to defend my moral character. You know, we've probably seen this a million times, right? Resmaa Menakem talks about, it's really been only in the last couple of decades that people of color have had dominion over their own bodies. And so entitlement to people of color's bodies comes out in lots of ways, right? From just violating the space, to touching the bodies, to expecting you to carry the emotional burden of race, you know, all of that. White people in North America live in a society that is deeply separate and unequal by race, and white people are the beneficiaries of that separation and inequality. As a result, we are insulated from racial stress at the same time that we come to feel entitled to and deserving of our advantage. Given how seldom we experience racial discomfort in a society we dominate, we haven't had to build our racial stamina. Socialized into a deeply internalized sense of superiority that we either are unaware of or can never admit to ourselves, we become highly fragile in conversations about race. We consider a challenge to our racial worldviews as a challenge to our very identities as good moral people. Thus, we perceive any attempt to connect us to the system of racism as an unsettling and unfair moral offense. The smallest amount of racial stress is intolerable. The mere suggestion that being white has meaning often triggers a range of defensive responses. And these include emotions such as anger, fear, and guilt, and behaviors such as argumentation, silence, and withdrawal from the stress-inducing situation. These responses work to reinstate white equilibrium as they repel the challenge, return our racial comfort, and maintain our dominance within the racial hierarchy. I conceptualize this process as white fragility. Though white fragility is triggered by discomfort and anxiety, it is born of superiority and entitlement. White fragility is not weakness per se. In fact, it is a powerful means of white racial control and the protection of white advantage. The unexamined beliefs that prop up our racial responses. I could see the power of the belief that only bad people were racist, as well as how individualism allowed white people to exempt themselves from the forces of socialization. I could see how we are taught to think about racism only as discrete acts committed by individual people rather than as a complex, interconnected system. And in light of so many white expressions of resentment toward people of color, I realized that we see ourselves as entitled to and deserving of more than people of color deserve. I saw our investment in a system that serves us. I also saw how hard we worked to deny all this and how defensive we became when these dynamics were named. In turn, I saw how our defensiveness maintained the racial status quo. We can literally think about it as state-sanctioned, organized crime, but at least discrimination against African Americans from the beginning. And it starts with kidnapping and 300 years of enslavement, torture, rape, and brutality, and it carries on. And about a quarter of the way in, you see bans on testifying against whites, which made it technically legal to murder black people in this country, and you are now in my lifetime. And I'm going to say it again because a lot of white people seem to think it ended a long time ago. We are in my lifetime about a quarter of the way through that slide. And then we see about 2/3 of the way through employment discrimination, and we are in 2018 with copious empirical evidence. Right? So let's pick it up there. Employment discrimination, educational discrimination, biased laws and policing practices, white flight, subprime mortgages, mass incarceration, the school-to-prison pipeline, disproportionate special ed referrals and punishments, testing, tracking, school funding, biased media representation, historical omissions, and so much more. It is a system, not an event. It's the system we're in, and none of us could be, and none of us were exempt from its forces. If we want to be unique and special individuals, then we need to figure out how whatever we see is special and different about us set us up into that system. The question is not if, it's how. Okay? I'm going to repeat it. It's a system, not an event. And how do we cope with the moral trauma of what I just read to you? Okay? Resmaa Menakem has a beautiful book, My Grandmother's Hands, where he talks about racial trauma. There's a trauma, I believe, to white people of racism, but I don't think it's a moral trauma. Right? And it's a piece of white fragility, not being able to face our complicity in this system. So that definition actually functions to protect racism, even as it looks like progress, right? Racism became bad post-civil rights. This is the root of virtually all white defensiveness, and it just functions so beautifully to exempt us. So we just have to get rid of it. And when white people hear me and they feel angry and pissed off and defensive, can I just say this? Damn white people are pissy about racism. We are so pissy on this topic. We're mean on this topic, right? And so if you're sitting here feeling that, just see if it isn't rooted in this definition. And if you cannot let go of this, you're just not going to be able to move forward. So aversive racism is a form of what sociologists call new racism, right? And so it's racism that progressive whites are most likely to hold, but because it conflicts with our identities as good people, we're most likely to be in denial about it. Great example of white fragility, and it connected to this last bullet here, is the eruption of umbrage and criminalization when a black man simply went down on one knee respectfully. Talking about Colin Kaepernick. What interrupts our racial equilibrium? Well, if you challenge objectivity, if you talk openly about race, right? If you challenge white entitlement to racial comfort, if you challenge to the expectation that people of color will serve us and do our work for us, if you break with white solidarity, you challenge white racial.
All right. So that's that. The reason I wanted to play that is because everything she said was visible in my comments. She has studied this stuff, and it was all in my comments, and it was terrifying. Terrifying in a way that's like, oh my God, we have got a lot to do. I'm here trying to do something good. I'm thinking, I can't have a reasonable conversation with these people. I mean, it's just so inbred into them about we're just the enemy that it was alarming. It was alarming. So I thank you, Dr. D'Angelo, for this study. I know that you probably get hateful comments because when I played that clip on my Facebook page, they had some things to say. They did. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share some comments that I've gotten, and then we're just going to unpack them. So the section 1 is going to be victim mentality. Tired of the victim mentality. The race card is getting old. Stop making excuses. I probably receive more comments like these than any other, and I understand why people feel this way. If someone believes all black Americans do is complain about the past, then I can understand why they think that. But here's what I think. We're missing one another. Talking about history. Let me play the comment that I got here about victim mentality. What did I say? Is it this one? That's not the right one. Let's see. Victim mentality. Okay. Not that one. I can't remember which one I had on the victim mentality on that one. Let's see. I can't remember that. But one of the comments that I had was that we're always playing the victim. Was it this one? Not that one. Let's see. Let's just go with here. The one that says the race car. Here's one. Some person said, because every time things don't go y'all's way, you call the race card and it's getting old. I got that comment right there. That was from the race card. So let's just show you all the comments, and then I'll just go through and do the talking points of what I got. So we'll just go through all the comments that I got like that. All right, so let's start with this one. Black people stereotype. Why is it? This is from a guy named John Taragunsky. I shouldn't have put his name, but it came up on there, so there it is. We'll probably never meet each other again, but he's been in my comments a lot. Why is it? This is what he said. Why is it most black folks are successful, happy, articulate, educated, and then there's the rest? Generational failures, criminals, and disgruntled racist morons hurling blame everywhere. but where it belongs. And while they're stealing everything they can, they claim the closing stores are victimizing their community. And then another murderous criminal POS is justifiably shot. Guess what? Their fellow criminals smash the place up. When people of color demand affirmative action privilege, DEI privilege, or any other arrogant demands, we shut down. We are sick of your pathetic crime. And why should we listen to your money scam race hustle? I think he's talking about reparations there. So that was that one. All right. And the next one, this is one that I got a lot. Less than 2% of Americans own slaves. All right. We're going to unpack that too. That's a good one. And here's a comparison one. What about the Irish? They were treated terribly, but got over it with hard work and self-respect. They are really comparing us with a white Irishman as being parallels. And they got over it, but we didn't. Okay, that's a good one. This one I call the race card, because every time things don't go y'all's way, you call the race card, and it's getting old. Yeah, we do that. We call the race card. But you know what? We only do that when it shows up. That's just what we do. That's who we are. We do that because we want you to do right. Here's one on ghetto culture. This is ghetto culture mentality. The black community is full of intelligent, civilized human beings. Unfortunately, while the black community is wonderful, we also have the subculture of ghetto culture, and they give the black community a bad reputation. The black community needs to distance themselves from thugs, be holding them to accountable for their behavior. Stating someone didn't do something that is clearly a lie makes you look like a fool. Hold all criminals accountable. White culture does not protect our criminals just because they are white. We are not them, and you need to decree. I don't know what he's saying there. You are not ghetto culture. Do not defend them. And and the language here is always kind of off-putting too. And here's one on Obama. This is crazy. Now this one here, I'm gonna do last. Let me do the last one here. And there is no systematic law that paid 2 or 3 generations money to sit on their asses and do nothing to exist. But here we are. So that's the whole, we're all on welfare and we just getting money. That's all we do. All of us. That's what we do. Yeah, that's us. And this one here was about Obama. When I said something about how when Barack Obama was elected, that's what they've been upset about forever. And he just runs free in their heads. And I don't understand that. So this is a person here, and I've been going back and forth with them trying to understand what they were trying to say. But they're so far gone. It's just useless. So, but here's what they said. I'm going to read the whole thing. Well, you and I don't agree. What there is wrong today is there's titles for everything. And whether you like it or not, Obama is the one who brought back racism. I didn't listen to your whole podcast because all I have to do is use the few words you've used and all about this tribalism. I talked about tribalism. So let me explain to you. I've never judged anybody by the color of the skin, but I have judged people based on their actions and their hatred of God, family, and country. Anybody that wants to change the standards of what our country was built on and has grown on and has achieved on is not a true American. I read exactly how he wrote it. Okay. There are too many people of every color who have succeeded here in America, but we perfect absolutely not is there always room for growth. Yes. I didn't catch that. But for somebody to want to completely change our government and our morals, no, they can go to hell. I will stand straight and true and tall and fight to keep America down the same path 250 years has brought us against anybody who wants communism and socialism. So I asked them to explain I said 1, 2, 3, 3. Tell me the things that Barack had been divisive about. Of course, he never came back with anything because there is nothing. Oh, he said something about having a beer summit. So I think that went back to the time when Skip Gates and Barack was talking about when the man was arrested in his front of his house for trying to go in his own house. He was arrested by a policeman, and Barack had a beer summit. So I guess Barack is not allowed to be black because he came to the man's defense that was being divisive. I don't understand. It's just weird. This is really weird, y'all. It really is. So that was that strange comment there. All right, so we need to talk about history. History is not the same thing as the refusing responsibility. Those are two different conversations. Black Americans have always believed in hard work, y'all. We've served this country in every war. We've started businesses. We built schools. We built churches. We raised families. We created music that changed the damn world. We did. Created inventions that changed the world. That doesn't sound like victimhood to me. We're not victims. When I discuss history, I'm discussing context. Context isn't an excuse. History isn't about blame. History helps us explain how we arrive where we are today. If we refuse to understand history, how can we honestly understand the present? So we're not trying to be victims. Guys, we don't want to be victims. We just don't want you to run over us. That stuff is gone. And if you show us any remnants of what you were back in Jim Crow, we're going to call it out. If that's victimhood, well, we're sorry. But you're not getting away with it. You're not getting away with it. Okay? So, answer your question, we are not victims. Now, the next one I got a lot about was, what about the Irish? What about the Irish? I mean, I actually appreciate these comments because, they're rooted in something that is historically true. The Irish people experience terrible discrimination. There were signs up saying, they read, no Irish need apply. That happened. They faced poverty. They faced religious discrimination, violence. Those stories deserve to be remembered. And I'm not diminishing those, but here's where our histories differ, guys. Irish immigrants came here as free human beings, Ellis Island. Black Americans were brought here as property. Irish immigrants could eventually own land, vote, become citizens, and accumulate wealth. Black Americans spent generations legally denied many of those opportunities. Why don't y'all understand that? That doesn't diminish the Irish suffering. And acknowledging black history doesn't diminish Irish history. This isn't a competition over who suffered more. It's not. It's recognizing that different communities experience different forms of hardship. It's a narrative some folks lean on because it sounds like a quick parallel, Tough start, hard work, upward mobility, but that frame skips crucial differences. Chattel slavery. They didn't come on here and ships stacked like animals. They were not stolen from their own land. They came here on their own. Chattel slavery was race-based, heritable, legally codified for centuries, and Jim Crow enforced a caste system long after emancipation. Irish immigrants certainly faced nativism and brutal discrimination. They did, but they were not enslaved as a race. And over time, they gained access to legal whiteness and its protections. So when people equate the two, it's often a way to make a messy history feel simpler or to dodge racial specifics. If you want, I can get into the details a bit and unpack it and let you know it's all, so we can take it step by step. So let's go here. Irish immigrants in the 19th century faced ugly anti-Catholic bigotry, job discrimination, violent harassment. They were poor, exploited, and scapegoated, but they were not permanently racialized, cast in law. Okay? Over time, they could vote, they could join the police, they could fire departments, access homesteading, naturalized, run for office, eventually became voted into the legal and social category of white. That pathway and the protections that came with it were not available to black people emerging from slavery. Emancipation didn't come with land I can't say that word, distribution at scale, and black codes, convict lynching, redlining, and disenfranchisement. They were all part of the law and policy that locked people out for generations. That's the cultural divergence. So do y'all get that? You can't compare the Irish experience, though they had one, but they do not compare to the black experience. Quit making that crazy parallel. Like they got out of it. Yeah, they did, because there were no laws against them. Why don't y'all get that? Why don't y'all get that? And that came up in my comments 1,000 times. What about the Irish? What about the Irish? I said, okay, God, here we go. All right, so the next section is, this is where they said, I never owned slaves. I never owned slaves. Only 2%. And this is what they said. Less than 2% of Americans owned slaves. And this is a point I hear often. And honestly, I agree with part of it. Most Americans today never owned slaves. Neither did I. I didn't either. I didn't own no slaves. No. I don't believe people should carry personal guilt over something they never personally did. That's not my message, okay? My point has never been about individual guilt. It's about understanding how history continues to shape institutions. No one alive built the interstate highways, yet we all benefit from them. No one alive wrote the Constitution, yet it still governs us. History leaves behind systems, some wonderful, some painful. Understanding those systems isn't about assigning blame. Okay? It's about understanding our country honestly. That's what it's about. So when people say only 2% own slaves, they're focusing on a narrow question, personal guilt. But the conversation you're having is about systems, public policies, not head counts. Slavery wasn't just a private behavior, it was legal, protected by the state, enforced by the courts, tied up with the banks, railroads, insurance, the lot. And after abolition, policy choices kept shaping outcomes. Laws about voting, housing, schools, jobs, criminal justice. These structures affected generations, regardless of who personally owned slaves. You may not have owned them, but you benefited from the system. So it's not about individual blame. It's about what the government built and maintained over time. So quit saying that. Only 2%. So what is that? What are you saying when you say that? You didn't own slaves? Okay, you didn't. Neither did I. Neither did I. But you benefited from the system of slavery. You were in it. Whether your people owned them or not. You benefited from whatever system they had the slaves couldn't do. You used the law. You executed the law whether you had slaves or not. Y'all did it. Okay? So it was benefited by your people. They did. So let's quit saying that. All right. And the next one is my favorite. Just move on. This one always makes me pause. Because every nation remembers its history. We remember Pearl Harbor. We remember September the 11th. We remember the Holocaust. We remember the Great Depression. We remember the Civil War. Why? Because remembering helps us learn. Nobody walks into the Holocaust Museum and says, just move on. No, you don't. History isn't remembered because we enjoy pain. History is remembered because we hope not to repeat it. I believe Black history deserves the same respect. Remembering doesn't trap us. ignoring history can. So quit telling us to move on. Our history has shaped us into who we are. And we're this way because of history. Do you get that? White Americans, you don't have the same history that we have. Do y'all get that? I don't understand why y'all don't get that. Okay? All right. Now, the next thing kept coming up there. It's like, everything isn't racism. I mean, I actually agree with part of these comments too. Not every traffic stop is racism. No, not every disagreement is racism. And not every failed opportunity is racism. Sometimes people simply make poor choices. That's true. Sometimes law enforcement acts appropriately. That's true. These things are true, but history also shows us there have been times when racism influenced policing, housing, education, employment, and voting. We come back to those all the time. Those things are also true. Rejecting every claim of racism isn't any more accurate than assuming everything is racism, okay? Truth often requires us to hold more than one reality at the same time. So yeah, there are some black people that are stopped that actually do deserve to be stopped in a traffic situation. Yeah. But there are some that are treated like murderers. That's not right. It's a traffic ticket. Why am I dead? Do you see what I'm saying? So, two things can be true at the same time. In this case, they are. Wow. So, the next thing is like character over race. I love this statement. Character matters. Personal responsibility matters. Education matters. Family matters. Faith matters. Work ethics matter. I believe all of those things. I mean, Martin Luther King Jr. spoke about judging people by the content of their character. That's the ideal that I embrace, and hopefully everybody should. But recognizing historical barriers doesn't erase the importance of personal responsibility. The two ideas can coexist. We can encourage people to work hard while also acknowledging that history has affected where different communities started. Those ideas don't compete with each other, they complement each other. Got that? They complement each other. So it's like I'm probably going through all of this teaching. They're going to come back into my comments and they're going to just bash me some more with some stuff. And hopefully they get some clarity of what they're saying in their comments. But we will see. All right. So next is, they called me a racist a lot. I was being called racist. Am I racist because I talk about race? That was another theme I noticed in the comments. Several people called me racist, not because I insulted everyone, not because I promoted hatred, not because I claimed one race was better than another, because I didn't do that. Simply because I talked about race. That made me stop and think. When did talking about race become the same thing as being racist? When did that happen? Where was I? I want to be very clear. I don't hate white people. I don't blame every white person for history. I don't blame anyone alive should carry personal guilt for something they never personally did. I mean, I've worked besides white coworkers. I've been mentored by white. I've laughed with white friends. I worship with them. I mean, this conversation that I'm having isn't about hating anyone. It's about understanding one another. That's what I'm trying to do, guys. I think we've reached a point where we use the word racist so casually that we've almost stripped it of its meaning. To me, racism isn't talking about race. Racism isn't acknowledging history. Racism is believing one race is inherently superior to another, or denying someone else's humanity because of the color of their skin. That's something that I reject completely. If I ever see it, I'm calling it out. And all I'm asking you to do is you call it out too. But y'all are unable to see it. And I don't understand why you can't see it when it's visibly there. Why can't you see it? Why can't you see it? All right. And the other thing that I was being called a lot is this ghetto mentality. We all ghetto. I mean, I appreciate the comment because I agree with one important point. Crime should never be excused, regardless of who commits it. And that's talking about when we used to do a lot of the riots and how people were looting and all that stuff. Who committed it? If someone breaks the law, they should be held accountable. Where I disagree is when we begin using labels like ghetto culture in a way that paints an entire community with one brush. Every racial group has criminals. Y'all have criminals, extremists, and people who make terrible decisions. Y'all have all that too. Yet we don't usually define an entire race by its worst members. The overwhelming majority of Black Americans are hardworking people, raising families, serving in the military, teaching our children, running businesses, working in hospitals, and contributing to society every day. They deserve to be seen too. And you know what's so funny? All of them kept saying this stuff, and I bet you 90% of us never even encountered a Black person or even lived near them. They just seen them on TV and on social media. And you know what? In my algorithm on my reels, for some reason, I looked at one fight of two girls fighting. All I get is fights. And you know what I see? A lot of ghetto mentality, if you want to call it that, and all that stuff. I see just as many white girls fighting as I do Black girls. So y'all fight. Y'all do all those things that y'all are calling us about. Yes, y'all do. So the people that don't do these things, they deserve to be seen as well. My goal isn't to defend criminals. My goal is to defend fairness. Hold individuals accountable for what they do, but don't ask millions of innocent people to carry responsibility for crimes they didn't commit. No. We can condemn criminal behavior while also rejecting stereotypes. Those aren't opposing ideas. They're both part of pursuing justice. One moment. All right, so here's a careful way to frame this. If you listen, this is a careful way. Think about it. Let's think about it this way. I'm going to talk about statistics. As one of the guys, I challenged him and said, so you're trying to say that Black people are the only one that have crime? Are we the only one that have crime? So the FBI's arrest data shows that Black Americans are disproportionately represented in arrests for some violent crimes related to their share of the population. But arrests are not the same as underlying criminal behavior. They reflect enforcement patterns, reporting, and other factors too. Victimization survey shows more nuanced picture and also shows that most violent crime is intra-racial. That means most of the crime that goes against people is done within their own race, meaning it happens within the same communities. When researchers ask why crime concentrates in certain places, the strongest predictors are things like concentrated poverty, neighborhood disinvestment, lack of opportunity, but not race itself. Not race itself. If it helps, I'm not here to deny crime and statistics, but jumping from disparities to race skips the why. The why is where policy, history, and investment live. Why I keep talking about this, guys. People ask, why can't you just move on? Because race has been a part of American history from the beginning. If I talk about Pearl Harbor, that doesn't make me anti-Japanese. If I talk about the Holocaust, that doesn't make me anti-German. If I discuss September 11th, that doesn't mean I hate Muslims. Talking about history isn't hatred, it's education. I love history. History deserves to be understood. I love history. People deserve to be respected. deserve to be respected. That's all we want. We're not trying to get nothing from y'all. Yeah, we talk about reparations, and I think that needs to happen too. But that's a whole different conversation. But what we want the most is respect, fairness. We want everything to be done the same way it's done for you. So you want to know where my heart is? If you've watched this podcast for any length of time, you know something. I've never called for revenge. I've never encouraged black people to hate white Americans. I've never encouraged division. In fact, I spent an episode after episode asking us to talk to one another, to listen. That's why I want these dumbheads to listen to the entire podcast, to understand the exact opposite of racism. I've never claimed to have all the answers, guys, and I don't. I'm still learning. But if someone shows me evidence that changes my perspective, I'm willing to listen. That's why I ask from everyone watching. Don't assume the worst about me because I talk about race. Listen to the entire conversation. This is the whole podcast, guys. You may not agree with every conclusion I reach, but I hope you'll see my goal has never been to divide people. My goal has always been to understand one another a little better. Now, reading some of these comments, guys, was difficult because people disagreed with it. It wasn't difficult because they disagreed. I actually expect disagreement. I did. What saddened me was how quickly many people assumed they already knew my motives. Very few people asked, Carl, help me understand why you feel this way. Ask me how I feel. Instead, many people just immediately assume bad intentions. And I think I become good at arguing with them. I got to stop. I got to stop it. Yeah. So if you watch this podcast, I want to thank you for following me and engaging, whether you agree with me or not, or disagree with me. Thank you for staying in the conversation. Because that's really the reason for my podcast. Get into the conversation. Let's do something, guys. We need to create a space where we don't want to create a space where difficult conversations can't happen. We want something where they can happen. If a black American can't share his history without being called a racist, maybe we need to rethink how we have these conversations. How can we have them? Y'all need to listen to us. I don't want the enemies. I don't want echo chambers. I don't want people who simply agree with me. I want honest conversations. Because conversations create understanding. There's this podcast out there, I can't think of it's called, Necessary Conversation, I think it's called, where this brother and sister are trying to de-MAGA their mother and father. Mother's starting to listen to stuff. But dad, oh God, he's way out there. And they know it. And I don't think they're gonna ever get him to think otherwise. He grew up in the Jim Crow South. And that's where his mind is. But conversations create understanding. Yes. And understanding builds trust. And trust is what moves a nation forward. So I'm going to continue having these conversations, even though they're coming from me, and I know they're not easy. Sometimes I was reading those comments and I started feeling a little bit into myself, but I've gotten pretty immune to them calling me names and posting pictures of apes and all kinds of things like that. But I hope that you have found something in the words that I've said today in this podcast and what we're trying to do. Guys, those comments you wrote, they were pretty hard. Some of them were terrible. And I want to believe that we have a greater society than what I've been seeing in my comments. Social media is a trip, guys. People will say anything to you. They will. It's really scary, too. So, that's my podcast for today. I just wanted to go through some things, talk about some of those comments that I got. And I'm still getting comments, guys. I wasn't going to turn them off, but
I just let them come in. I just let them come in, you know. And every now and then, if somebody says something that's way off-putting, I jump in and I say something back to them in the comments. Because I don't want that to be left out there as gospel. Okay? So thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Let's Talk with Carl E. Long. I hope you have a wonderful day now. Bye.